Here is a question that is going to make a lot of people in this community deeply uncomfortable. What if the thing you switched to Linux to escape is already inside Linux? Not as a rumor, not as a theoretical possibility that someone cooked up in a forum thread, but as a documented, measurable, structurally embedded reality that has been building quietly for years, while the community that cares most about it has been looking the other way, focused on the familiar enemies, the obvious villains, the corporations whose names we already know to distrust, while the same dynamics we fled from took root in the place we fled to. I want to be honest with you from the start. This is not going to be a comfortable video. I have been sitting with this research for a while now, turning it over, checking the pieces, making sure I was not connecting dots that did not actually connect. And the more I checked, the more uncomfortable I became. Because the dots connect. They connect clearly. And the picture they form when you assemble them is one that every person who has ever recommended Linux as the privacy-respecting, community-owned, corporate-immune alternative to Windows needs to sit with, honestly. I still use Linux. I am still going to recommend Linux. But the version of that recommendation that leaves out what I am about to tell you is not an honest recommendation. It is a comfortable story that the community has been telling itself, and comfortable stories that stop matching reality are not a kindness to the people who believe them. So let us start with a number, because this is where the whole thing begins to unravel. In the most recent analysis of Linux kernel contributions, covering multiple development cycles, tracking lines of code, patch submissions, and the engineering effort flowing into the kernel that runs at the heart of every Linux system. On Tatidu, the top contributors are not the independent developers you might picture. They are not volunteers working evenings and weekends because they believe in something. They are employees, paid employees of Microsoft, Google, Red Hat, Intel, and Samsung, contributing code to the Linux kernel as part of their salaried employment at corporations whose commercial interests in where Linux goes are exactly as real and exactly as financially motivated as any corporation's interest in any software project it pours engineering resources into. Let that land for a moment before I continue, because I want to make sure the weight of it registers properly. Microsoft, the company whose CEO once stood in front of an audience and called Linux a cancer, the company whose entire business model spent decades depending on Linux not succeeding, that Microsoft is now one of the top contributors to the Linux kernel, contributing more code than the vast majority of individual volunteer developers whose community effort was supposed to be the structural guarantee that Linux could never be captured the way every proprietary operating system has been captured. Now, I want to be precise here, because precision matters in a conversation like this. I'm not saying Microsoft's kernel contributions are secretly malicious. I'm not saying every line of code that Google's engineers push into the kernel is a Trojan horse. What I'm saying is something more uncomfortable than a simple conspiracy, because simple conspiracies are easy to dismiss, and what I am describing is not easy to dismiss. The question of who controls the direction of Linux development, when the majority of the engineering resources flowing into that development are being paid for by corporations with specific commercial interests, is a question that has not been answered with anywhere near the rigor that the stakes demand. And it is a governance question, not a technical one, which makes it harder to see and harder to argue about than a line of malicious code. Here is the structure that makes this concrete. The Linux Foundation governs the Linux kernel development process. Its platinum members, named the organizations that pay the largest membership fees. The organizations that fund the Foundation's operations include Microsoft, Google, Intel, Meta, and Amazon. Platinum membership comes with seats at the governance table. The governance table is where decisions about the direction of Linux development get made. The organizations with the most financial stake in those decisions are the organizations with the most influence over how those decisions get made. Connect those dots yourself. Tell me with confidence, actual confidence, the kind that survives someone asking you to justify it, that the Linux kernel's development direction is immune to the commercial interests of the corporations whose financial contributions to the Foundation by them influence over the governance structure that shapes that direction. If you can tell me that with genuine confidence, I would genuinely like to hear the argument, because I have been trying to construct it and I cannot make it hold together. And this is not even the most urgent problem. This is the background, the structural context. The most urgent problem is something that happened in early 2024 and got 2 weeks of coverage before the news cycle moved on and the implications got left behind, unexamined, sitting in a place where they are still waiting for the serious, sustained attention they deserve. I am talking about XZ Utils, and if you followed this story when it broke, stay with me anyway, because the headline version, a backdoor was found, a developer caught it, disaster averted, is technically accurate and completely misleading about what the story actually reveals. I want to end with something that I think matters, because I'm aware that this kind of analysis can produce a paralysis that helps nobody. The cataloging of problems without the framing of possibility is just dispiriting, and dispiriting people into inaction is the opposite of what this conversation needs to produce. So let me say this clearly. Linux is still the best option available for people who actually care about controlling their own computing environment. The problems I have described are real problems. They are not fatal problems. They are not irreversible problems. And crucially, they are visible problems. Visible in a way that Windows and Mac OS and Android's real and serious problems are not visible, because those systems are closed and their problems can only be theorized, while Linux's problems can be seen, documented, studied, and addressed. The open source model remains the right foundation. The transparency that makes these problems visible is the same transparency that makes them addressable. The community governance that corporate influence is pressuring is still community governance. It can push back, it can organize, it can build alternative structures, and in some cases, it already is. The XZ Utils response from the security community has been serious and organized. The conversations about corporate concentration in kernel governance are happening, even if not yet with the urgency they need. The work on secure boot alternatives is proceeding. But none of that work proceeds far enough or fast enough without the community understanding the terrain it is working in, without understanding that the pressures on the Linux ecosystem have changed significantly from the pressures it was designed for, without understanding that the comfortable story, Linux as the uncapturable, corporate-immune, community-owned fortress of privacy, is a story that needs to be updated rather than defended from examination. The open source model is worth defending. The Linux ecosystem is worth the honest conversation about its problems. It is worth the financial support flowing toward the maintainers whose burnout is the attack surface we cannot afford to leave unaddressed. It is worth the vigilance whose absence in the case of XZ Utils brought the ecosystem measurably closer to a serious catastrophe than most of the people who use Linux every day have any idea about. The threat is there. The problems are visible if you look for them. The organizations doing the work are worth following and worth supporting. And the conversation that these problems require, the community discussion that produces the community response that the stakes actually demand, starts with the community being willing to look at the picture the pieces form when you assemble them honestly. That picture is uncomfortable. I know it is uncomfortable because I have been sitting with it, and it is still uncomfortable even having thought through all of it carefully. But uncomfortable pictures of real terrain are more useful than comfortable pictures of terrain that no longer exists. Linux is worth the honest conversation. The community that built it and uses it and advocates for it and depends on it is worth the truth about what it is up against. And the alternative, the comfortable story, the uncomplicated recommendation, the fortress that no one is allowed to examine critically, is not the thing that made Linux worth defending in the first place. What made Linux worth defending was always the openness, the transparency, the willingness to look at what is actually there and work on it honestly. Let us keep doing that, even when, especially when, what is actually there is something the comfortable version of the story would rather not look at directly. This is the conversation. It starts here. Make sure the people in your life who need to hear it, hear it. And then there is the third problem, the one that gets the least attention of the three. The one whose implications are the most immediate for anyone who uses Linux and believes that using Linux means controlling their own computing environment. This is about UEFI Secure Boot and Microsoft's control of the signing infrastructure that determines what can and cannot boot on modern PC hardware. Here's the background. UEFI Secure Boot is a security feature built into the firmware of modern computers. Its purpose is legitimate and genuinely useful. It prevents malware from modifying your bootloader and loading before the operating system to intercept everything that happens afterward. The underlying idea is sound. You should not want unauthorized code running before your operating system loads. Secure Boot is designed to prevent that. The problem is not the concept. The problem is who controls the trust infrastructure that Secure Boot relies on. On the overwhelming majority of modern PC hardware, the trusted authority whose signatures Secure Boot trusts is Microsoft. Microsoft controls the UEFI certificate authority. The CA, whose signatures the firmware on most modern computers is built to accept, which means that for Linux distribution to boot on most modern PC hardware with Secure Boot enabled, its bootloader needs to be signed by a certificate that chains back to Microsoft's infrastructure. The major distributions handle this through what is called a shim, a small bootloader that Microsoft signs, which then loads the distribution's own bootloader after verifying its own signatures. In practice, this means that Linux's ability to boot on most modern PC hardware depends on Microsoft's willingness to continue signing that shim. Microsoft has so far continued to do so, but the decision about whether to continue, the decision about what conditions to attach to that signing, is Microsoft's decision made by Microsoft, subject to change by Microsoft, with nothing in the current architecture that prevents a different choice from being made. I want to be clear about the power dynamic this creates, because it is easy to read past it without registering what it actually means. The corporation that once called Linux a cancer holds the cryptographic keys that determine whether Linux can boot on the hardware most people buy. That is not a theoretical leverage point. That is an actual leverage point, and we know it is actual because we have already seen it exercised. In 2023, Microsoft updated the secure boot revocation list in a way that broke the boot process on certain Linux systems. Not a catastrophic, widespread failure, but a real one, affecting real users running real Linux systems. And the way those users found out was not through advanced coordination with Linux distributions or advanced notice to the Linux community. They found out when their systems stopped booting. The Linux community scrambled to respond, to issue fixes, to communicate with affected users, and they managed it. But the sequence of events was explicit. Microsoft made a change to their infrastructure, Linux systems broke, the Linux community reacted. That is the direction of the dependency. That is who is upstream of whom. The long-term solution is hardware that boots Linux through Linux-controlled signing infrastructure, and work toward this exists. There are efforts around alternative trusted computing architectures, around firmware that does not route through Microsoft's certificate authority, around hardware vendors who ship systems with configurations that give Linux users actual control over their own boot infrastructure. Purism, System 76, and a small number of other vendors are doing this work, but the timeline for these alternatives to become broadly available across the consumer hardware market is not short. The dependency that exists in the meantime is the dependency that exists. And most Linux users are running it on hardware where Microsoft is upstream of their ability to boot their own operating system. Now I want to pull back and hold all three of these problems together because individually each of them is a serious concern. Together they form something more significant than the sum of their parts. The kernel development direction is shaped by governance structures that corporations with specific commercial interests in that direction fund and participate in. The critical infrastructure of the Linux ecosystem is maintained by volunteers whose documented burnout has been demonstrated to be an exploitable attack surface for sophisticated actors with nation-state level resources and patience. And the ability of Linux to boot on modern hardware is structurally dependent on the cryptographic goodwill of the corporation that was Linux's most powerful enemy for decades. The narrative that has sustained the Linux community through years of advocating against Windows surveillance, against Google's data architecture, against Apple's walled garden, the narrative that Linux is different, that Linux is community-owned, that Linux is the uncapturable alternative. That narrative needs to be updated, not abandoned. Updated. Because the environment Linux is operating in has changed significantly from the environment the open source model was designed for, and pretending otherwise is not a defense of Linux. It is a disservice to it. Because here is what I genuinely believe, and this is the part I want to make sure comes through clearly. These problems are visible, they are documented, they are discussable, and they are addressable in ways that the closed source alternatives whose problems are equally real but entirely invisible do not permit. The XZ Utils backdoor was caught because the code is open and someone could look at it. The corporate contribution concentration is documented because the kernel development process is transparent and the data is public. The secure boot dependency is understood and alternatives are being constructed because the community can see the dependency and can work on solutions without requiring anyone's permission to do so. The open source model is not broken, but it is under pressures it was not originally designed to manage. And the first step in managing those pressures is the community acknowledging honestly that they exist. So what do you actually do with this? Because I know that walking through 3 structural vulnerabilities in the platform you rely on for privacy and security without any concrete direction is not useful. Let me make this as actionable as I can. If you write and maintain open source software, even a small package, even something you assume nobody critical depends on, read the XZ Utils postmortem in detail and then audit your contributor list with what you learned from it. The behavioral signals that Jiatan's attack produced are documented in retrospect, and they are specific. Pressure to release faster than you are comfortable with, urgency that does not match the actual timeline requirements of the project. A contributor who seems extremely motivated to accelerate your decision-making, specifically around code that affects security-relevant pathways. These are the signals. They are not conclusive on their own, but they are the signals that a responsible maintainer who has read the postmortem knows to slow down and examine carefully rather than to interpret as enthusiasm and welcome. If you are choosing hardware and the secure boot dependency concerns you, and it should for the reasons I have described, know that alternatives exist. They are not mainstream. They are not available at your local electronics retailer, but Purism, System 76, and a handful of other vendors ship hardware with boot configurations that do not route through Microsoft's certificate authority, or with core boot replacing UEFI entirely. These options exist. Knowing they exist is the prerequisite to being able to choose them. If you are buying hardware in the next year, spend 30 minutes researching these vendors before you buy something where Microsoft is upstream of your bootloader. If you use open source software, which, if you use Linux, means you use a lot of it, support the maintainers of the projects you depend on. Not abstractly, concretely. GitHub sponsors, Open Collective, direct project donation pages. Look at the projects that are genuinely part of your computing infrastructure, look at who maintains them, and find out whether that maintainer has a way to receive financial support. The maintainer burnout problem is fundamentally a resource problem, and resource problems have resource solutions. The aggregate of a community that genuinely cares about open source security, directing real financial support toward the critical infrastructure maintainers whose burnout is the documented attack surface, would meaningfully change the security profile of the entire ecosystem. This is not glamorous. It does not feel like security work. But it is the most direct intervention available for the structural vulnerability the XZ Utils attack exploited. Follow the organizations that are doing the actual work on these specific problems. The Electronic Frontier Foundation on the legal and policy dimensions. The Open Source Security Foundation, OpenSSF, which is working directly on supply chain security, on frameworks for understanding which packages carry the highest risk, on tooling for detecting sophisticated supply chain attacks before they reach production distributions, the Software Freedom Conservancy on corporate governance and open source license compliance. These organizations are doing the substantive work, and they need the attention and the support of the community whose infrastructure they are protecting. And then there is the simplest and most important thing, which is to talk about this, share this, have this conversation with the people in your world who care about Linux, who care about open source, who have been recommending Linux as the answer when people ask about escaping corporate surveillance operating systems. Not to undermine the recommendation, Linux is still the right answer for people who actually care about controlling their own computing environment, but to add the honest complexity that makes the recommendation real rather than idealistic. The version of the Linux recommendation that leaves out corporate capture of kernel governance, that leaves out the XZ Utils attack, and what it revealed about systemic maintainer vulnerability, that leaves out Microsoft's control of secure boot signing infrastructure. That version is not serving the people who receive it. It is giving them a map of a territory that no longer perfectly matches the ground. And people who are navigating based on that map will make decisions that the accurate map would have led them to make differently.